Okay. All right. So, it's great to see everybody. So, last week we set the foundation for Kibud Avim for respecting and fearing a parent. And we mentioned that there's a connection to this very obscure mitzvah. You're all well aware of it. Shiluach kan sipor, where, hey, Mickey, where we're
Hi, Ricky.
obligated. How are you? Where we're
Hunky
obligated.
dory.
Good to see you. Good. We're obligated to make sure that the mother bird is pushed far away from the nest. Should we take the eggs or the chicks? So we said that these are two of the few mitzvot where a reward is identified, and it's the same reward, so to speak. That a person will have arichut yamim, will have long life, God willing, and a person will have the ma'an yitavlo. Then a person will have a good life. So on these two mitzvot, which seem to have nothing to do with each other, and you're all familiar with this, so I'll just give you a quick overview. These two mitzvot, which seem to have nothing to do with each other, both of them have the rewards, so to speak, articulated, and the rewards are exactly the same. Long life, a good life, and in terms of the first one of Kibud Avim, it's mentioned that the good life that person enjoys will also be more significantly connected to the land of Israel. Good. So last week we talked about the foundation of Kibud Avim. What we're going to do this week, God willing, is touch on a few of the ideas that relate to this issue of forcing away the mother bird, what that's about, how it may shed some light on the mitzvah of Kibud Avim, of honoring a parent, and then we're going to start to delineate some of the specific mitzvot, which I think will be particularly interesting. As we mentioned, Chaim Yitzchak Yosef, who writes the Yalkut Yosef, dedicated almost 1,000 pages to this issue. What we want to do today is, after we sort of complete the background on it, not really complete, but fill in a little more of the background, want to talk about some of those mitzvot, which I think will prove interesting, enlightening, and God willing, helpful in terms of how we live and in terms of the core values that we attempt to build in our children and grandchildren. So first of all, the mitzvah of shiluach hakan, of pushing away the mother bird, brought in Sefer Devarim, and it's framed in an interesting way. It says, Ki kara kan sipor lefanecha baderech. If you happen along to a bird, into a bird nest, if you happen to bump into a bird nest, meaning if the bird nest is part of your property, or if you planned it, hey Serene, if the bird nest is part of your property, or if you planned it, it's not the same thing. There's back and forth on whether you can plan it or not, but there's certainly nobody who will say that if the bird nest is on your property or somebody else's private property for some, in that sense, that you can go ahead and do this mitzvah. But let's assume that you're walking down the road, and David, to what we said a few minutes ago, this would probably be more likely in Deal than Brooklyn, right? I would guess. And there's a bird nest, and you see, maybe not. Yeah, right? Jamie says she saw one here once. And there's a bird nest, and we see the mother bird. Now, what is the tendency of birds? Our rabbis say is very interesting, that generally speaking, during the day, the father bird hovers above the nest and protects the nest, and it's generally between 5 and 7 p.m. and into the night hours that the mother bird flies above the nest and protects the nest. Therefore, if you happened along a bird nest during the day, chances are it's daddy hovering above the nest, above his.
I mean, you can take it away?
Huh?
Does that mean you can take it away when the father's there?
No, great, David. You cannot. You don't fulfill the mitzvah.
You could.
The only way you fulfill the mitzvah is by forcing the mom to leave. If you
it has to be a kosher bird, yes?
And yes, it has to be a kosher bird, yes. A, it has to be the mother and not the father. B, it has to be a kosher bird, meaning it has to be a bird we would eat. If it's not a bird we would eat, then it doesn't apply. So in the ideal sense, somebody's walking down the street, looks up at 5, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock at night, notices a bird hovering above a nest, it's in a public domain, not a private domain, assuming it's in the evening, he can assume, or the person, she can assume that it's some mother bird up there. And at that point, the idea would be to force the mother bird to get very distant from the nest. So our rabbis say she somehow disengages from her children. Now, biologically speaking, do we know that if the bird got within 30 yards from the nest, would she literally disengage emotionally? We don't know that. But our rabbis say that if she's still hovering within 10, 20, or 30 feet of the nest, she's still absolutely connected to her children. And you have to scream and wave a stick and do whatever's necessary to do to get her to get very far away. Okay.
Well, Ricky,
Very curious. Yeah.
there's a thing that if a human touches the eggs of a bird, the mother disengages with the bird.
Right. She won't go
smells
back.
human touch. She won't go back. She'll just
That's right.
abandon her.
That's right. She won't go back to it. That's true. So we'll talk about that in a little while. Excellent. We'll talk about that in a little while. Is that Rabbi Shem Tov on the phone, on the call, on the class? I think maybe a dear friend hooked on. We'll see if he's here. Okay, he's moved to Florida, Rabbi. See if he's here. Yeah.
I have
So
one question.
I haven't seen him in a while. Yeah, Mick.
How could performing an act of cruelty bring reward to somebody?
Fantastic. Excellent point. So hold that for a few minutes. How can performing an act of cruelty? Oh, it is the rabbi. Hi, how are you?
Hey Ricky, how are you?
Good. Thrilled to see
Hi,
you.
Aaron.
See you
Thrilled to
too.
see you.
Yep,
Good.
see you too.
So yes, how can an act of cruelty be rewarded? So our rabbis, the Ramban Nachmanides actually asked that question when he deals with the fact that a number of the rabbis say that this is about teaching people to be sympathetic, manim, teaching people to be merciful. And he says that, I don't know about the merciful thing, because really, where's the mercy come into play here? And that's B. And A, he says, we go out and we slaughter animals all the time. So if this is really about having mercy on animals, I don't buy it, he says. But a number of the rabbis do say that it is about developing an element of mercy, and to the sense that, well, what do you mean we slaughter other animals? We're not all that merciful in doing that and ending their lives, right, for our own pleasure. The rabbis say this is a way to control that chsariyut. This way of pushing away the mother might be a way for us to learn to be more empathetic to animals, regardless of the fact that we eat them. Okay, impossible. The a few other perspectives on this. The Moreh Nevuchim says that yes, it is about mercy. It is about building the element of mercy in us. The Sefer HaChinuch says a similar thing, but goes one step further and says that this is to teach us that not only does HaKadosh Baruch Hu watch us, but he's sensitive to our midot. So God isn't only watching all of us and the paths that we take in our lives, but God is also sensitive to the core attributes that we develop and express. And therefore, he wants us to make this element of mercy paramount, because he's sensitive to our attributes, to our core character traits. Okay, very interesting. In other words, he's saying that let's leave aside for a minute, although it's true, the fact that there doesn't seem to be an absolute clarity here in terms of whether a person's going to become more merciful as a result of this or not. It's hard to say that he would, based on the overall context of things. Some rabbis say that, well, it's to limit achsariyut, it's to qualify the absolute abandon and free opportunity we have with animals, and it's to qualify that and keep it in check. And the Sefer HaChinuch brings down a very nice thing. He says, look, it's meant to tell you something else. It's meant to tell you that God is also looking at our character traits. Okay, fine. There are a few other points I wanted to highlight. Ramban Nachmanides comes back and adds something else to this. He says that the reason that this for this law is that someone should appreciate the movement from one generation to the next and should never extinguish two generations at once. Hi, Gailey. He says a person should understand the value of father to son, of mother to daughter, of mother bird to the next generation, should understand the value of that in the context of the world and life in general. And that's what this mitzvah comes to teach us. Leave the mercy thing aside. Maybe it's about mercy, but let's leave it aside, he says. And he says it's to sensitize us to the fact of parent and child. Now, let's remember that, because that's particularly interesting, because that comes back into play in terms of some of the mitzvot that we're going to learn. So to recap very quickly, can it be about mercy? Possibly. We know, and we've talked about this, some of us have talked about this, is there really a reason for mitzvot? And does that reason have all that much value? I don't know if there's a reason. We don't know if the reasons have much value.
Doesn't matter.
Right?
Right.
Doesn't really matter.
Does it matter?
Doesn't matter, but sometimes our rabbis strive to find a reason to enable the mitzvah to be indulged in a more deep or more committed way. But in fact, our rabbis qualify all of this by saying, who cares about the reason? They say, who cares about the reason? And then they bring us a number of reasons. One of the other
Isn't this example a hook? Isn't this known as a hook?
Absolutely known as a hook. It's absolutely known as a hook. And at the end of the day, that's where we're going to go back. And obviously, I'm not suggesting that it's not. We all know that. The reason I'm bringing up the reasons I'm bringing up, the rationalizations that I'm bringing up, is because they're going to help us understand the halachot of Kibud Av V'Em better.
Sure.
Going to help us understand the laws of Kibud Av V'Em better. The Netziv says a very nice thing, that it should teach us a different kind of sensitivity, a general sensitivity. It should teach us that don't put someone in a compromised position and then compromise that person. He says that don't go ahead and shush the bird away. Hey, Erwin, don't go ahead and force the bird to get away. And then when it comes back to protect its offspring, go ahead and take the bird and eat the bird. He's saying that don't go. We all came off our chicken or fish dinners. We didn't think about this, right? But now we think about it. But he says, don't go ahead and force the bird to leave, or trap the bird when you get there because you want the offering or the offspring, or you're making believe that you do. So don't go ahead and take the bird, meaning that we're trying to teach you a second level type of sensitivity to things. Okay, in other words,
Musad, like a musad, right? We're learning musad here.
Yeah, good. You're going to go ahead, and because the bird is attempting to protect her offspring, she's going to be hovering over them, and you're not really going to work that hard, and you're not really going to work that hard in trying to get rid of her. So then you go ahead and you take advantage of her wanting to care for her children. Keep in mind that you will, the Netziv says, put people in compromised positions and have the opportunity to take advantage of those people, and you mustn't do so. Okay, could be a reason. Again, could be just an interesting insight. One or two more. Rabbeinu Yosef Ibn Kaspi says a very nice thing. He says that men and women were only supposed to eat from the plant kingdom, Chaim Tovim. Men and women were only supposed to eat from the plant kingdom. And this is coming to teach us this, although we were allowed to eat from the animal kingdom and birds as well, we should be sensitive to these other living beings. And finally, the Zohar says a very nice thing. He says that this is all symbolic. He says the purpose of this is to send a message to God, not to do anything to me or to man or to the person who does it. He says the purpose of Shidduch Kansipod, of pushing away the mother bird to take the eggs or the chicks, is to remind God about the distance that between a mother and her children, the pain caused by the distance between a mother and her children, i.e. the distance between us and him, the distance between us and the land of Israel. And when we go out and we do this mitzvah, it's not at all for us, it's not at all for us, but it's to just reach out to God and remind him and tell him, you see the pain of this bird? Well, you know what? We're in pain and we know you're in pain. So hasten the Geulah. Let us get back to Israel together in peace quickly. Okay, so where does this all leave us? We did it very quickly, but where does it leave us? It leaves us in a place where we're going to go back to the core point, hey Rochelle, hey Abe, we're going to go back to the core point that we mentioned last week, which is that Kibud, the reward for Kibud Avaim, the reward for honoring the is the long life and the good life and so on, is not a reward, but it's the extension of the action. It's the result of the action. In other words, that greater quality of life that the Torah describes as a longer life is not the result of a benefit that God gave us for doing it. You know, 1 day of additional life, for example, for every mitzvah of Kibud Ba'ev done or something like that. It's simply that the person's life is better if he or she is a person who has this level of Kibud Avayim in his or her life, and therefore the quality of life is better and the length of life will be greater as a result of that. So the same thing is suggested with the shushing away the bird. If someone has this level of mercy and this level of sensitivity, then the reason that his or her life will be lengthened is not it's not necessarily a longer life, and B, it's not necessarily a reward. It's a different quality of life, and any reward for this, as do most rewards, would come in the world to come. Okay, so any questions or thoughts so far? Pretty quick run there.
Oh, I jumped in late, but so you're saying that he's supposed to support the bird or let it fly away or no, it's not.
Right, we're saying we have to get rid of the bird. We have to get rid of the bird. We don't know why. We probably won't know why until Mashiach gets here. We suggested that there's something in it that might be sensitizing or transformative to the person, or it might be just a sort of shout out to God to make things better for us, as he is our parent and we are distanced from him, and to remember when he hears the cry of the bird being pushed away from her offspring, that's God's cry and his distance from us, and our cry and our distance from him. In any case, if there is a reason, and it does make us better people, if that's true, then that would come back to the approach that we're going to be taking in terms of our learning the laws of Kibud Avayim. That the reason that we're doing these things primarily is not for anybody else's benefit but our own. Good? I'm not honoring my mother or father or mother-in-law, father-in-law, whatever it might be, for anybody's benefit but mine. Now, does it additionally benefit them? Yes, but the primary beneficiary is me, and that's the approach that is the foundation approach to how we're going to learn some of these mitzvot.
So
Wait, Ricky.
the bird is the model then.
Huh?
The bird is the model on this
The
conversation.
bird could be the model, yeah, because the reward is the same. Yeah, Serene?
But it seems like the two mitzvot, which are both giving long life, it's almost like they're opposites. Like
How's
if you're,
that?
I feel like if you're sending away the mother bird, it's like you're not believing in the whole institution of child needing the parent. Like you're dishonoring the parent. So how, like, it's just funny that like you get the same, you're saying you get the same result of a long life, but you're like, they're both, it's like counterintuitive.
It's like, exactly. So the intuitive reaction would have been keep the bird with her sibling, with her offspring, right?
Right.
Yeah, that would have been the intuitive thing, right? That's right. And that's why the reasoning is difficult altogether. But we can't ignore that these two mitzvot have the exact same reward or benefit attached to them. We can't ignore it. So we have to attempt to connect them. And the rabbis write many, many tens of pages attempting to connect them. And I think we should be aware that the rewards are the same or the life benefit is the same. And maybe there's a developmental element between the two of them that's the same, maybe. But that's, I agree with you. That's as far as we can go with it. Because otherwise we don't know the psyche of a bird. We don't know the emotions of a bird. We don't know if a bird has emotions. And in that respect, I don't know, it's just so absolutely open-ended that we can only make good guesses based on the suggestions that Chazal give us, which I touched on pretty quickly, because I want you to know that there is a connectedness here. It's not a clear one, but because the benefits or the rewards are the same, our rabbis worked hard to say that what was transformative in one is transformative in the other. But I agree with you. It's tough. It's tough.
And also the thing that
Yeah.
prompts people to do this particular mitzvah is not out of wanting to eat the egg, or it's like people are going to work, they see on a telephone pole there's a bird's nest, and everybody stops what they're doing to go shoo the mother away. That's completely, the opposite direction of where you would think the Musar takes you.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. All agreed.
Yeah, but yet still a mitzvah. A mitzvah.
Yes.
Right.
So it's still a mitzvah. We've got a little bit of a background in terms of what some of the greatest of the rabbis have said about it. No one is absolutely going to say we're there. I would love to hear Rabbi Shem Tov's perspective if he wants to weigh in on this point. But I wanted you to know it and struggle with it a little bit, and struggle with the fact that they line up in many respects on the same line. Okay, so far? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Let's talk about some of the mitzvot. Okay. The first mitzvah of Kibud Avayim, interestingly, and when I reviewed this, I pounded my chest in as asking for forgiveness. The first one is Chiyuv Gadol al Kol Echad לקבוע שיעור על ההלכות האלו להיות בקיא בהם. That is a big obligation for every person to establish a class on this topic and to be well versed in the specific halachot. It's chiyuv gadol. It's a big obligation on every person. Doesn't say on every child. Doesn't say on every person up to the age of X. It says on every person to have a shiur. In fact, the rabbis go and say, and this was a mind blower to me, they say that, the same way we prepare 30 days before any given holiday, we put in 30 days of refresher study for the halachot of Sukkot, or Pesach, or whatever it might be. We should be carving out a 30-day period each year to do a refresher course on Kibud Avayim. And the rabbi says, crazy, right? Right, Erwin? Crazy. It's fantastic. What do you mean? I'm studying my head off to remind myself of the halachot of Pesach and of Sukkot, and of Yom Kippur and of Teshuvah and all those things that we think make our lives go and make the world go round, the rabbi says true. It's all true. But wait a second. This comes before all of that. None of those things are mentioned in the Ten Commandments. None of them are mentioned as being a cornerstone to how the world is built and our relationship to the world and to God. None of those things. Kippur is important, and Pesach and all these things are super important. But Kibud Av V'em, many times more important. And therefore, he starts off by saying that people should engage in a yearly class equivalent to a 30-day refresher that we do for the holidays on this mitzvah. And he specifically says that for yeshiva students who are off from school ben hazemanim for that 20 or 30 days during the summer, before they go home to be back with their parents, to leave the dormitory, they should be deeply immersing in the laws of Kibud Av V'em. So that's the first beautiful paradigm that our rabbis establish on this point. Everybody okay so far? Mitzvah number 2. Ready? You say, every mitzvah has a boundary. Every mitzvah has a gvul, right? We learned that together. Hidur mitzvah, the beautification of a mitzvah is generally 30% above market. You're not allowed, according to the halacha, to beautify your mitzvot at more than 30% above what the typical market price is. It relates to etrog, it relates to sukkah, it relates to anything you want to do more beautifully. It's capped. The only thing we have a much more excessive cap on, as we know, we studied it together, is the candles of Hanukkah, right? We said that was an 800% hidur, beautification. Over here, our rabbis say as follows: there is absolutely no limit and no cap to the mitzvah of Kibud Av V'em, of honoring and fearing a parent. There is no limit and no cap. Now, what if the parent is gone? Then what if the parent is gone?
You
Erwin?
can't bring them back. I mean, that's it.
Yeah, Zeke. Is
You honor their memory. You would honor their memory. You would
No, not enough. Not enough.
you would honor their memory, Kaddish. You would, I don't know.
You find someone else.
I'm sorry.
If
Maybe
somebody's
you
got
find someone else. You can find someone else.
Well, what else? What else is true? Well, what else? What else is true in this case? When does Kibud Av V'em end?
So Ricky, the other night, Rabbi Mitzvah said something very interesting. A friend of mine's mom passed away.
Didn't hear him.
So he said that your
Maybe you should log out and log back in. It's staticky.
Yeah, maybe you can get closer to your phone, Erwin.
You hear me now? That better?
Okay, let's try now. Okay.
That better? Okay.
Yeah.
Not a lot.
Right. So, no, Rabbi Manso said that, he was saying about this one, he said that as a child, that when your parent passes, the game's not over. You can elevate in their neshama by doing more and doing more and doing more. So let's say someone learned this at the 9th inning and the parent checked out. So so that you can continue that sport to elevate.
Very good. So exactly as the rabbi said, we don't have a time frame on this, and it doesn't end with a parent passing. And what that means is there has to be an ongoing sensitivity to my relationship and my responsibilities to my father and mother as long as I live. So if my father established certain core values in my family, I have an absolute obligation to maintain those values, because otherwise I'm disrespecting him. Now, is it the same as disrespecting him right in front of him? Obviously not. But do I have an absolute obligation to the values of my father? Yes. And in fact, one of the ways, as I quickly mentioned before, that the rabbis connect together the law of Kibud Av V'em and the pushing away of the bird is to highlight the fact that there is a generational connection between an animal and its offspring. And there certainly is a generational connection between a parent and a child. And that generational connection frames who we are, establishes our core values, and isn't lessened with the removal of one of those people. So this obligation of Kibud Avim en Gvul, the mitzvah, it has no limit, and v'chol hamarbeh harei zeh meshubach. Here again, because we don't have a cap, the more ways we find to express respect and love and fear, the more praiseworthy it is. So I don't complete the mitzvah by doing X. There is no completion of this mitzvah. It's absolutely forever open-ended and forever escalating. And the more ways I can figure out to express love and respect, I need to be doing it. Now, let's say a parent has passed. What would be an example? What would be examples of what we would do after the parent is not here anymore?
Ricky?
Yeah, what would we do? Yeah.
So I learned that the children are the legs of the parents in this world, and whatever that child or the children, grandchildren do in this world when after the parent has passed, even without saying Liloy Nishmat, they don't even have to say Liloy Nishmat for Beracha. All their prayers and all their Torah and all their learning and all their good deeds, when the parent, when their parent comes to, I guess, the yard site date, or it's time to be elevated, it's waiting on the legs of the children. Also, they go higher with
Beautiful,
what their
Adolph.
children have accomplished.
Absolutely right. So absolutely right. Beautifully said. So my parents' core values have to be reflected in my behavior, and I have to build on it and I have to grow it. And it should be just a practical expression of my life. In other words, one of the things that I should be thinking about is, well, my father's core values were X. So have I raised the bar on X in my life in the last, month or two or three or year? Am I in the game? Am I keeping myself aware, to Adele's point, are my father's core values top of mind with me or my mother's? And am I working to build them? So that's mitzvah number 2, that there is no gvul, there is no limit. Kol hamarbeh harei zeh meshubach. These are strong halachic terms that the people who do more will be blessed more. And to Adele's point, the legacy brings with it great responsibility and opportunity. Okay, now we're going to drill down a little bit more. Mitzvah Gimel, the third mitzvah, which he actually breaks off into a handful of them, he says that a child has to build himself to find ways to love a parent more over time. In other words, we don't have a copacetic type of thing. We don't have a status quo relationship. As long as the parent is in my life, my opportunity is to find ways to love my parent more. The tzarich livnot et atzmo hayelad, according to Chaim Yitzchak Yosef, based on the words of his father, has to build himself and herself continually to figure out ways to love a parent more. And, sorry to say this, guys, but the rabbi identifies that this is more incumbent on the son than the daughter. Why? Why would you say?
Because the son carries out the name and the daughter
Yeah, but
doesn't.
even more down and dirty than that, Sarah. What would you say? What would you say? Why is this mitzvah more incumbent on the son?
Because the men have a tendency not to do it.
That's right, Abe. That's right. Beautiful. That's right. For a son every son loves his father, God willing, right? But for a son to grow the love for his father, continue to grow the love for his father, is much harder, our rabbis say, than for a daughter to do it. And therefore, this mitzvah is more incumbent upon the son or the daughter. He says, Bifrat haben la'aviv. And it's not even the son to the mother where it gets complicated. It's the son to the father. That's where the greatest complications are. And that's where the greatest work that there is to be done. So the child has to build himself to figure out over time how to increase the love that he feels for the parent. Easier to happen between daughter and mother or father, or daughter and father. Hardest, or mother and son, or son and mother. Hardest to happen between son and father. And here's where the son has the greatest call out here. And in fact, our rabbis spend a good amount of time talking about the complexity of the relationship between the father and the son, to say that the son's obligations here are significant and are forever and are very difficult. But this is what the halacha defines for the son, that he should be looking for ways throughout time when the parent is alive to find other ma'alot in the parent, other qualities in the parent to love. Now, the point of finding qualities to love is called out on a separate line. It's called out on a separate line. And the rabbi says that part of mitzvah number 3 is to look at mom and dad, but again, particularly between father and son, but between parents and children, and identify ma'alot to love in them. Identify beautiful things to love in them. What are we talking about here? Look at mom or dad and identify beautiful things to love in them. What's going on? Sounds very simple, no?
No, because sometimes you pick on your mom and dad. So instead of that, look for the good things.
That's right. Sometimes you pick on them, and sometimes a person, as he or she gets older and doesn't have the full, array of strengths that he or she had, then in our minds, we start to identify the weaknesses. And the mitzvah is the exact opposite. If X strengths are no longer overt and prevalent in the person, so now my job is to seek out new ma'alot, new strengths, new beautiful character traits, and highlight those in my mind. So on the one hand, there's no cap. There's no ceiling to this mitzvah. The side point to that is that the more a person does, the more praiseworthy he is. And again, the praiseworthiness here doesn't have much to do with the reward. It has to do with how his life will be enriched as a result of doing it. The drop down to that is, you know what? It's always a little more complicated between a father and son than a mother and daughter, mother and father, or a son and mom. It's always more complicated. And the rabbis are straight up front in recognizing that. And the rabbis say that the son in particular has to be continually searching to identify those ma'alot, those outstanding traits in both parents, particularly the father, and he has to zoom in on those traits and grow his love for his father based on those traits. Now, whereas the father may have had 20 outstanding traits when he was at a certain stage of his life, and now life has changed and he's at a different place, and the number of those outstanding traits have lessened, zero in on those. Good?
Or find more, right? Or look for more.
Or identify new ones. Great, see. Identify new ones. Great.
Right.
Now, what about when a parent asks a child to do something? Let's talk about an adult parent and an adult child. does the child have the obligation to do it?
If as long as it's not killing somebody or crossing the line.
Beautiful. As long as it's not going against Torah, then the
Right.
child has an obligation to do it. Do they have an obligation to do it in a certain way? Is the
Yes.
next question.
I
The
would think,
smile.
So they have an obligation to it. What were you gonna say, Sarah?
I would think yes, because it shows honor to your parents if you do it in a nice, correct way.
Okay, so what the rabbis describe here is it has to be done bizirizut, which means quickly and immediately, right? We should get more of our kids on this.
I was gonna say, why did you tell
Oh,
us?
Where
Well,
are they
let's
when
see
we
here
wanna
it
yell at them?
No, I'm saying here, could you flip it? And in other words, all the stuff that we're supposed to be doing for our parents, let's say, let's say my case, my parents passed away, and I believe whatever, I've always said them more and more and more, but I believe I gave them tremendous respect. But I'm just saying that, can you flip this to your kids and say, hey, you know what? This is what I did for my parents. And hey, what about me? You wanna buy it?
Look, we have to educate them because we
I
don't.
think you lose points if it's forced. You lose points for being forced, don't you?
But they have to be educated. They have to be educated. And really part of, I think, the challenge here and the opportunity, but the challenge is how do we educate our children to this? Because they didn't study it 30 days a year, every year, right? They didn't.
They should
We
be,
didn't
but they're
either.
not.
All right, we didn't either. So going forward in our educational institutions, we should be implementing this 30 days a year, God willing.
I
Yeah.
don't think so, Ricky. I think that you have to be the kind of parent that commands or earns this kavod. That's your job, because it's so good for your children. You have to make it your job to make that happen for them, right? Because that's important to
You're
you.
100% right, but it doesn't work.
But
It
sometimes,
just doesn't work. Yeah.
sometimes on his note, kids can't see you're doing the best for them.
Right.
So,
But I'm saying like this. I want to
takes a
go
long
with a
time.
different approach. I want for all of us to suspend our Western approach on this. I want you to suspend it for the purposes of this for the time being. I want you to suspend it, and I want you to go with a different approach. The approach is, and I'm speaking to what Zeke, you and Sarah said, because it's true, and we all feel the same way. But I want you to leave that reasoning, and I want you to go to a different level of reasoning, and that is, this is halacha. This is the law. The same way we have many, many, many details of the laws on Shabbat, on how to keep it properly. We have many, many details on the laws of Kibud Avim. And this is about teaching my child the halacha. That's what it's about. That's where I want us to reframe this. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, Serene, go ahead.
But you're saying, like, when you're saying if the parent asks a child to do something and you do it, and you don't do it with zirizut, you're saying that you're not fulfilling the halakha. I feel like there's two parts to it. There's one is actually the action, and the other one is like the intention. So are you saying that if you don't have the right intentions, you're making a sin and you're not fulfilling the halakha?
Beautiful point. In Kibud Avim, we have a very, very blurry line in between doing the mitzvah and doing the mitzvah happily and quickly. And there's differences of opinion here. And we touched
limitless, though.
What? Huh?
It's limitless. It's limitless. You could do it. There's no limit to how great you can do and how many points you can score with this one.
There's no limit. But the bottom line is it has to be done quickly, zealously, and happily. We touched briefly just for a second last week on how the rabbis say that if someone fed his parent delicacies begrudgingly and had him grind the wheat or the olives with him, breaking a sweat joyfully and with love, that the second person fulfilled the mitzvah and the first person didn't. Because to Serene's point, in this case, it's about doing it and it's about how it's done. Because the term kavod, it's not a black and white term, right? Think about it. Zeke, we're learning this in terms of Hilchot Shabbat, right? It's not a black and white term. It's not I did it or I didn't do it. To be mechabed, to honor and respect, is by definition unclear. So the fact, and Serena goes to your point, because it's the crux of all of this. And that's where I want to attempt for us to have a transformative perspective on this in our minds. Let's see. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu frames this from the perspective of kavod, of honoring, and not something much more basic and measurable, it's meant to be the action plus. Right.
Also the reward, I mean, the result, I feel like has a lot to do with the intention, not so much the action.
Beautiful.
And the target, but also the target. It has to do with the target. I mean, it's not just in your hands. It's in the recipient's hands. Also.
Absolutely. By the way, absolutely. We're going to talk about that in the next couple of weeks. We're going to talk about the other side of the equation. We're going to talk about that. But now, to each of you, to your points, it's the action and the intention, and that's why the term kavod is used. The term kavod is an amorphous term. It's not a black and white term by design. How do you respect something? How do you honor something? When you obey the person, it doesn't say obey mom and dad. HaKadosh Baruch Hu could have said obey mom and dad. He didn't say obey mom and dad. He said fear them. He said fear mom and dad. He said and he said honor them. So the honor is where it gets a little bit unclear by design. And that's why we might say, and I agree with you, Serene, I struggle with this as well. We might say that in this case, doing the action and the way it was done are on the same level. We might say it's
so.
Yeah.
So then if we're saying that, let's say we talk about something that's cut and dry, I'm going to pick one, maybe wearing tzitzit, for example. You wear tzitzit, the mitzvah is accomplished, right? There's not really that much more you could do with it. Yet, I would imagine that if you had somebody who every single time he put on his tzitzit went, oh, I hate my tzitzit, I can't wear this. Every day walked around, oh, it's the worst. But he wore them. He wouldn't get the same amount of whatever as the guy who wore it with love, with happiness.
Right.
It wouldn't make a difference.
It wouldn't make a
Great
difference.
example. It's a great example. It would not make a difference.
I don't agree.
All right, that's.
So now there's a child.
I want to live in a world
better
that
if you don't agree. I'm happy.
Yeah. I mean, there's a child.
I want to live in the world where it does, but I agree. That's why I said.
I have a question.
Wait. So
who's that?
Me. So if a child is doing a mitzvah for you, rolling their eyes, mumbling under their breath, and making you miserable, that can't be considered.
That's not it. No way.
Of course, that's what I'm
Can't be
saying. Over
considered
here, that's
being
exactly
done.
good purpose.
You see, you get the points.
Yeah, that's exactly the point. Over here, it's all about getting it done and how it's gotten done. All about
landing
that.
it, landing
Right.
on the other
Whereas
person.
with tzitzit, it's the other way. If I'm struggling to get it done and I do it anyway, I may get more credit. Now, that doesn't mean I can fob it up and make believe I don't want to do it and get more credit. But if I'm really struggling to get it done, right, not as dramatic as Zeke described, but let's say something like that, right? If I'm trying to get it done, if I'm struggling to get it done, I may get more credit, right? Right? Okay, but in this case, it's not the same.
It's that.
Rochelle in a male voice. Who is that and what was your question?
Rochelle Levy, I have a deep voice, I'm sorry.
Okay, great. Okay.
Rochelle Sit Levy. Better?
Oh, nice.
Does that
Yes,
help?
beautiful. Yes. Thank you for joining the class.
Thank you. So what about intent? Does intent fall into anything over here anywhere?
So it's a very important question.
To do it very well and to do the best they can. And
so it's a very important question because in the case of Kibud, of honoring a parent, we believe that the intent will be transparent in the action. In other words, in most things between man and man,
Everybody mute your phone for a second there. Mute.
Yeah, everybody mute. I'm going to mute everybody for a second. Okay. All right, great. We have a little bit of the thing, and unmute whenever you're ready. Okay, when it comes to man and man, right? The intent overwhelmingly comes out. The perspective about doing the action overwhelmingly comes out. And that's why, for example, and it's a great point you're raising, that's why we generally speaking, overwhelmingly speaking, we don't say a beracha on a mitzvah between man and man. We never do. Because does a person really want to do it? Does he really care about doing it? Does the other person receive it? It's really so ambiguous. But in these mitzvot between man and man, the intent plays a huge factor. And it plays a huge factor, particularly in this mitzvah, because our rabbis say that, again, going back to the term kavod or respect, which is in the inappropriate translation, let's just stay with the word kavod. Let's stay with the word kavod. Kavod means heavy. It means there's something heavy going on here. Kaved, the root source of the word is kaved. So over here, the intent is extremely important because it will manifest in the zirizut, the level of quickness that it's done, the smile with which it's done, the expression of kindness with which it's done. All of these things is going to come out. So the intent here is more measurable than in most cases. And in general, the intent on mitzvot between man and man is much more of a factor than it is even between man and God.
Rick, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Talking about mitzvah between man and man, what about the other one of the aseret hadibrat of ahavta l'reacha kamocha? Is the ahava, the love, is that alone the action, or do you have to have like an intention there?
Fantastic question. So over there we say al tisnat achicha bevadecha. The balance of that pasuk is that you can't carry ill feeling for a person in your heart, which means that we have a mitzvah d'oraita, a biblical mitzvah against carrying ill feeling for a person in my heart. So it doesn't have to man itself in any action whatsoever.
Right.
It could all be about how I feel.
Okay.
And the same thing is true with a parent. The same thing is true with a parent. With a parent, it's probably going to come out, but the same thing is true with a parent. Harboring, and we're going to talk about that. We're going to spend some real time on that. But harboring ill feelings about anybody is problematic, even though it's only about feelings. It never manifested in action, and because it takes its toll on the individual himself, and will ultimately come out. But carrying that negative feeling is a problem in and of itself.
Right. So you're saying there's no mitzvah aseh to love your neighbor?
There is, but
Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha.
Right. I'm saying is that
yeah. Now, not one of the 10 commandments. No, it's not one of the 10, but it's a mitzvah.
Isn't it?
It's immeasurable, though. But it's immeasurable.
No, it's not. It's not one of the 10 commandments. No, but it's an extremely important mitzvah to love our neighbor. And the continuation of that pasuk is not to carry ill will in the heart, neither of which may manifest in action. That's what's so fascinating about them, right? They're purely about feeling. Now, one other element here in Kibud Av, we'll go another 7-8 minutes. One other element in Kibud Av is that when somebody does a mitzvah for a parent, again, he should do it quickly. He should do it happily. He should do it, hopefully, finding more core characteristics about mom or dad that he can now focus on and love. And he should do it l'shem mitzvat kibud av va'em. When a person is doing something to honor a parent, he should have in mind that he's fulfilling the mitzvah of honoring a parent, which is another very big thing. Why do you think that's important?
Because of intention, right? That has to be, it's all about intention. So if you're not having that in mind, that's why you're doing it, you can't possibly be doing it for the right reasons.
Excellent. And what happens?
Then it's going to get carried out improperly. You're going to do, it's not going to go over well.
Even if you carry it out well, you're not being transformed by the action. In other words, we said that the benefits here that are articulated, the long life and the quality of life, are not rewards, but they're the transformation that happens to a person as a result of doing these things. So if you're doing it quickly and happily, and top of mind, you have the perspective that I'm doing it to honor my parent, grandparent, father-in-law, mother-in-law, older sibling, I'm doing it for that reason, then that awareness is going to have a transformative impact on me. With the lack of that awareness, will have less of an impact.
And you won't resent it.
And I won't resent it, Godwin. Right. I won't resent it. Right. Shouldn't resent it. Right. Are you saying you would, or are you saying
No,
you won't?
you wouldn't resent it because you're doing it l'shem of the kaved et abicha v'et imecha, and you're doing it to really honor them and feel and transform yourself. Now you won't resent it anymore.
Exactly. Beautiful. One quick story and we'll wrap up. So let's just recap the mitzvot real quick. Mitzvah number 1 is that a person should study these mitzvot 30 days a year. And the rabbis identify yeshiva students should be studying it as well. What do you mean? Wouldn't a yeshiva student be sensitive to this issue? He's less involved in the rough and tumble of the world. Wouldn't he have the sensitivity top of mind? The answer is no. And he should be studying them 30 days a year. In the same way we study the halachot of a holiday 30 days before the holiday, we should study these halachot at least 30 days a year, preferably before the summer break, where I guess the sensitivities would be high, whatever it might be. The second halacha that we studied tonight is that there is no limit to the mitzvah Kibud Avayim, as opposed to just about every other mitzvah in the Torah, where you can take it to a certain point and then it stops. There is no limit here. And people who do more and more, it's praiseworthy. And the last group of mitzvot that we touched on tonight was that a person has to identify and continue to identify over time those beautiful characteristics in a parent. And those characteristics may change in time as the parent's strengths and involvement and core focuses change. The child has an obligation to identify those strengths and put them top of mind. A son in particular has a responsibility to work hard to grow the love that he feels for his father. Every child has a responsibility to work to grow the love they feel for a parent. And when a child is asked to do something, and here again, it's highlighted particularly between a son and a father, it should be done b'zirizut, meaning it should be done immediately. It should be done b'simcha. It should be done happily. And it should be done with the perspective of the Shem Kibud Avayim. I'm doing this for the mitzvah, to fulfill the mitzvah of honoring a parent. And to some of the questions that we had that were very, very important, the point of the term kavod, and I want you to please have this in mind for the next 2 or 3 weeks as we learn more about this. The term kavod is by definition a term that must be worked with. It's not hard and fast, and it's not black and white by design. We're going to talk about yirah, which is fear as well. We'll talk about some of those things. But the term kavod by design is meant to be a little amorphous, a little non-exact, exactly for the purpose that we're working with tonight, so that I discover it, so that I continue to find new expressions to it as time goes on. The beautiful story that goes back to the Baba Sali, to the great Rabbi Abu Hasira, who was a Mikubal and a great rabbi in the past generation. The rabbis tell a nice story about him as it relates to Kibud Avayim. He says that there was a lady who was bringing her son in to be spoken to by the rabbi because the son was very delinquent in Kibud Avayim, that he was very hurtful to his mother, was very disrespectful to her, and the mother didn't know what to do anymore, so she wrote a note, got an appointment with the rabbi, wrote a note to the rabbi that she sent in with the gabbai before the rabbi saw them, and then came in with this young teenage boy, or this teenage boy. The rabbi looked at him and started to cry, And he said, if only my mother were alive, if only my mother were alive. And then he got himself back together. And he said, I'm going to tell you a short story. He said, my father, alav shalom, had a period in his life where he was ill. And he used to groan a lot from the illness. He was in tremendous amount of pain, and he would be moaning and groaning all day long as a result of his pain. And my brother, the rabbi says, told my father one day, Daddy, can't you groan a little bit less?
Go ahead.
And my father, the rabbi says, turned to my brother and told him, here it was, I thought you were a perfect diamond, and now I see you're not. That was the father's response. So the son, this other rabbi,
I thought you what? What did you say to him?
I thought you were a perfect jewel or a perfect diamond, and now I see you're not.
Wow.
So the son, according to the story, is very shaken and hurt by what he heard. And he runs off to an obscure Bet Midrash on the other side of town, and he becomes a recluse for a year, and all he does is study. Okay. After the year goes by, the son sends back a message to the father asking if the father would see him, and the father tells him, "Yes, I'll see you." And the son comes back into the room crawling on all fours and says, I'm paraphrasing, Daddy, I will carry your feet on my palms for the rest of my life. So the rabbi told the story to this young adult, trying to make an impression on him on what it means to honor and respect a parent. So what do we do? What is he meant to say here? You're talking about people who were well-educated people, who you might say were great people. The father was groaning out of pain. People, when they get to a certain stage in life, the bodies don't work as well. They're not as flexible. They don't bounce back as quickly, or whatever it might be. So when that person groans, what is that child's reaction? In this case, it was an elderly father with two grown sons, and the son came out and said, Daddy, do you have to groan all the time? Or can you groan a little bit less? Now, I think all of us have said that on some level to a parent or in our own hearts. I would imagine that our children have maybe said that to us or in their own hearts. This is human nature. It's true. But what we want to do here is we want to educate ourselves and our children that if and when they stumble into something like that, they catch it immediately and they understand it and they move beyond it. So even a phrase like that is biting and extraordinarily disrespectful. On the other hand, what we want to be doing is if we train ourselves to see the beautiful things in parents, and we train our children to look for the same in us, in their grandparents, in their in-laws, in their older siblings, the comment that comes out of the mouth is a beautiful comment, because a person is focusing on the strengths and what was given to them by that parent and so on. So this is about conditioning of the self. How I condition myself to see the people around me, how I condition myself to understand the people around me, and what comes to mind immediately. And what we want to be doing in ourselves, those of us, those who still have parents alive, Ad Me'ah V'Esim, should live to be 120 with good health, then for them, we want to train ourselves to be incredibly more sensitive and more aware and more complimentary. But no less important, we want to take this thing to heart and start teaching our children. Maybe part of the Shabbat meal, where we talk about Divrei Torah, maybe it should be 1 or 2 halachot on Kibud Av. Maybe it should be. Because ultimately, like the mother bird with her siblings and that multi-generational thing, this will only continue if we stand up and make it a point. I feel very strongly that this should be in our educational institutions, that it should be a segment 30 days out of every year, that there should be a class on this, that our children are learning and growing. Because the truth of the matter is, we all know it, because we're at different stages in our lives. It doesn't get more basic than this. And final point, before if there are any questions, is the child that has a better opportunity to express his or her love and kindness to his or her parent is a happier child. The Torah here wasn't worried about the parent. HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't mandate this for the parent. HaKadosh Baruch Hu mandated it for the child. And that's why the reward is the child's reward, not the parent's reward. The Arichut Yamim is what happens to the child when he keeps growing and refining himself to have this level of sensitivity and expression of love and gratitude. So we want to keep it top of mind. We want to grow and we want to sensitize our children to it. Thoughts, questions?
So
Good. Yeah.
if you don't have parents anymore, you
Right.
can still fulfill the mitzvah of Kibud Avayim and live a long life if you continue honoring them, even though they're not living.
That's
Would
right.
you
So
say?
you're going to continue honoring them, even though they're not living, by articulating their core values, reminding ourselves of their core values, and attempting to build them.
Right.
You know, I try to do that as often as I can. What did my father stand for? Now, I don't have to express what he stood for the way he did. I want to express some of the core values that he gave me, even if I express them in areas of my interest, not necessarily his. And what were my mother's sensitivities? And how can I those sensitivities and in my own life and in that way carry them on? Because by doing that, I'm honoring her and I'm instilling them in, God willing, in my children and people around me.
So you can
And
still work on it.
yeah,
You
and
can
the other
still
way to do it, Sarah, the other way to do it is to be very overt and in your children's face about what the family's core values are. You know, these are our core values, and we want you to know that. And these are my core values. And this is what I believe in. And this is what I dedicated a big portion of my life to. And they need to know that. I care deeply about learning Torah. I care deeply about chesed. They need to hear it over and over and over. And then they'll be able to emulate it. And by doing so, become better people and give the respect that should be given.
Okay.
Any other thoughts?
It's so interesting. I wish that the kids would even learn it for one day. I would be happy. I mean it. No, because they would want to do it.
They
They
want
just
to do it.
need
They
the
would want to
tools
do
to
it.
understand how to do it and
I
how
completely
important it
agree.
is.
I completely
yeah.
agree.
And you know what? I think every mitzvah, we don't have one that isn't or doesn't instill personal growth in doing so,
True.
in doing it. So why? It's amazing that we would think that this one somehow does, could be, the one that doesn't do that, but it does. It absolutely does, right?
It's great, Zeke. And you know what, to your point, it may do it even more than most other things.
Right.
Yeah.
I think also,
Amazing.
Ricky, that
Right.
Great concept.
Erwin, we can't hear you.
You still can't hear me now? No?
It's the microphone. Your microphone is fuzzy.
What about now?
No,
Yeah, now it's
A little
good.
bit.
Okay.
Any better?
Yeah.
little bit.
Yeah, so I think that as you grow older also, you appreciate and you step up your game.
Right.
as a young child, they're finding themselves. Let's say a teenager, and then I grew, and then and you step it up, and you step it up, and you step it up.
Hopefully you step it up. I think the biggest complexity is between adult men, adult son and adult father. That's where it gets the most complex. Moms and daughters generally have it a little bit easier, although it's
They
never.
don't have it so easy, Ricky.
No?
They really have. There's always
All right, all right.
conflict. The daughter thinks she knows more than mother.
All right.
It's
So,
just a thing.
so take that line out of the script. We'll take that line out of the clip. Great. All right, there's a great opportunity here. Let's
yeah.
grow, let's build, let's teach. And God willing, every week we'll do a
Great.
number of additional mitzvot in this. So we'll have very specific, practical things to build into our lives and those of our
Thank
children.
you so much.
Man, thank you, Ricky.
Chacham,
Okay,
Rabbi
guys,
Shem
thank you.
Tov, anything you want to add? We're honored to have you with us.
Thank you. Honored to be with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Great to see
you, Ricky.
everybody.
Thank you, Ricky.
Thank you.
Great
Take
class.
care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ricky.